Okay, can we get a, Mikey, can we take a roll?
Mr. Tripp. Here. Mr. Beard. Here. Ms. Duncan.
She's here.
Mr. Franklin. He's here. And Ms. Rossini is not, but you have to go.
Okay, yeah, I wonder where Ann is in Gallup. Yeah. Okay, we got everybody in the room. I want to welcome everybody to our meeting of the Legislative Affairs Committee, and I first want to thank everybody for all their hard work during the last year's legislative session. Everybody on the board did a wonderful job, but our board members of this committee, Norman Tripp, Richard Beard, Ann Duncan, and Gallup, and Maury Husseini, did an outstanding job, and I really want to thank all of you all for your hard work, and I want to thank our chair and our chancellor. But most importantly, I want to thank House Speaker Larry Creedle and President Jeff Atwater, who are true friends of the state university system. And the work of Speaker-designate Dean Cannon and President-designate Mike Herodopoulos, who have both continually shown their support for the state university system. Before I ask Rick to present the issues that we'll consider today, let me outline what today's meeting is about. First, our number one priority is to work with the legislature to favorably consider our 2011-2012 legislative budget requests, which all of us have just had an opportunity to review during the Finance Committee meeting. The issues our committee is reviewing today are substantive issues that have received the support of all 11 university presidents. Our mission is to agree on those 3 items, and we'll pass them on to the board at the next meeting. After the November meeting, Rick and the members of the Governmental Relations Committee will begin meeting with legislators to seek sponsorships of the bills we put forward. So that's our goal today, so I'm going to turn to Rick and ask Rick to go through the 3 items.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your packet behind the Legislative Affairs tab, you'll find brief descriptions of the 3 items. The first of those is Concurrency Trust Fund. The Concurrency Trust Fund is intended to pay for infrastructure improvements that happen when universities construct facilities. Several years ago, the legislature changed the funding source for that trust fund so that it goes into a local option fuel tax trust fund that benefits local, state and, county and cities. That money is used for various transportation-related issues. What we're asking for in this issue is for the legislature to redirect that funding source back to the University Concurrency Trust Fund. If they do that, then it generates about $15 million a year, which is adequate for addressing the needs that we have in the foreseeable future.
And where does that, who loses the money that's going to be redirected to us?
It doesn't get lost. It goes now to cities and counties. If they redirect it to us, we just become basically a hold and pass through to pay for specific infrastructure improvements. So if there's a loss, it's most likely a loss in how to direct that money as opposed to losing it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, because I'm not sure where everybody comes in on the issue of the Concurrency Trust Fund, but The idea is pretty simple but critical, and that is that if there is expansion and growth on a university campus, it might not even be the main campus, it might be a branch campus, and in negotiation with the local government feels as though there will be infrastructure expansion required of them because of the expansion by the university. It might come by turn lanes or stop signs or signage in general, utilities, but the idea is that the Concurrency Trust Fund over the years has provided an amount of money that could be used between the local government and the university to help the local governments through negotiation to deal with some of those impacts. The money ran out and was redirected. First was redirected, and then ultimately the amount of money that we had available finally ran out this past year. So again, in direct answer to your question, the money was redirected to local government, and if it is restored to the state university system, would still go very much to local government. It would only be routed through the universities based on specific projects and enhancements as a result of university expansion.
Frank, some places don't have universities there.
No, it's true.
So that could be the argument. The thing I don't understand is, Rick, and I think it would be helpful for us to know what occurred so that they stopped putting the funding into us. What was the intent of doing that? Was it because we had such a large reserve and we weren't using it that they said we're going to redirect it? Because if they did another reason, if they did it for another reason, that and they, you know, we've got to have, I think, a little book so the counties and the cities are not saying to us, you know, no, we don't want this to change. Because, frankly, I think it would be better if we didn't have the fund and the legislature changed so that we didn't have to go negotiate with the city or the county every time we wanted to do something on a master plan. Am I right on that?
No, and Rick, do you know the history of...
I don't know the intent, but I did ask the question and haven't gotten a clear answer about why it was done. I do know that city and county lobbyists say they really didn't expect it to happen. They asked for it, but they didn't really expect it to happen. So it seems like it was just almost a comedy of errors, because I can't find a real strong intent for changing it. Now, if I may, though,
But the question I have here is, before we go forward, I think we ought to try and decide whether or not we don't want to get something in the legislation that says that we don't have to go negotiate with the city and county and get their money. And let them just keep, I think that would be an easier situation for all the universities. I might stand corrected on that, but.
Well, I'll wait. Dr. Hitt has...
I would agree if you could simply get the law changed and we didn't have to negotiate, that would be ideal. Let me just share an experience, though, unless we be too worried about taking the money away from purposes within the county. It's our experience. We have a wonderful relationship with our host county, Orange County, but they don't necessarily spend the money they get through the concurrency negotiation to fix the problems that they say we are creating. They can spend it in another part of town. So if you can't change the law to where we just don't have to do the negotiation, they're going to spend the money where they're going to spend it anyway, in our experience. So you're not really taking anything away from them. You're just going to give it back to them, and they'll do what they want to.
So the sense I have is that if we were able to, as a policy, we were able to support either a elimination of the requirement on the universities, or unable to accomplish that, a return to the funding into the trust, that we would gain control back of these funds so that we would have them available to help you all pay for these assessments.
Yes, sir. The real...
I think our
I'm sorry.
argument is if we don't have it one way or the other, we can't change our master plan.
That's what I was just going to say. The problem is right now we have...
We're required to do it. If we don't have the money to pay it,
Correct.
nobody can change anything.
So don't we have to do this? No.
We have to do one or the other.
As it stands today, there are two problems. One, we have the requirement to deal with concurrency, and two, we don't have any money. there are two alternatives. One, the one that has just been discussed, which is to try to restore the funds. Believe me, local government will not like that. And two, is to eliminate the requirement to negotiate and therefore deal with concurrency. And believe me, local government won't like that either. So it really is, which way do you want to go, and which approach is the better. Either way, we will be taking on local governments on the issue, I believe.
Yeah, that's what, Governor Duncan.
Yeah, I guess, I think we have the growth management law in the state, and while it has been modified over time, I mean, there's a general requirement for concurrency, and service levels and things. And I think part of the reason why maybe President Hitt, you saw that they could take your money and not necessarily do your project and go somewhere else is they're taking averages and they're allowed to pool things a little differently to have more flexibility to address some of these issues. But I think it would take a pretty substantial change to the Growth Management Act to talk about just exempting us out. I mean, I think that is going to be a humongous battle that will take on more than just cities and counties. I mean,
Well,
you know.
the alternative is the legislature would have to tell us that the university system can't do any growing at all. Can't change anything at all. And that's a pretty hard thing for them to tell us when what we're trying to do with New Florida Initiative and everything is to change the way the state.
I guess that's my point, though. I think getting the funding and meeting the growth needs is probably a more solid position for us to be in than saying we want to exempt ourselves from growth management, basically.
Well,
I mean,
it seems to me that we can still do like the private community does. Every time there's a specific project, you include in your budget the cost of the DRI or the growth management.
I mean, pay as you go, basically.
And you pay it project by project, but that gets pretty complicated when you're talking about master plan.
But isn't it to all of our universities' benefit to get the restoration of this trust fund unless we're able to exempt them completely?
I was only throwing it out as the alternative.
So-
And I don't know, see, the problem, I don't know what kind of legislative action it would take for them to just say, we're not going to require you to pay.
Would you be,
Because we've given the money to the county anyway. I think we ought to look at that before we jump in.
And Amendment 4, what impacts that's going to have to this dialogue as well. I mean, that's going to add a whole nother layer of potential consideration approving growth plans and master plans. So, I mean, I think it is a pretty complex issue on a whole lot of.
I think the university system is exempt from a lot of it.
I don't think so.
not to my knowledge.
I mean,
But-
and I don't even think like federal governments. I'm working on another project where they're building a big. I mean, they're going to have to pay concurrency impacts. I mean, I think getting exempted out is a big deal.
Would you be supportive of a motion that, in favor of the restoration of the university concern of a dedicated funding source for the trust fund, absent an indication from the legislature that we're able to exempt ourselves completely? We have a second for that? Any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye. Got to say aye, say aye. It's a participatory process.
Ask for them to look up what
Yeah.
we have to do if we were to try to.
Happy to.
So we know what process.
Happy to do it.
We flew through that one, Rick. We got one down, two to go.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Mr. Chair.
Sir.
People can't hear you on the web if you're not turning on your mics.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Sorry about that. Great. I was trying to find out about how the funds distributed currently to local cities. So I'm not sure if that's based off of population or whatever the way it's distributed. So I was wondering how it's distributed because naturally you have institutions that might be in Orlando or Tampa who might need a certain amount to kind of help with the pressures with reference to them growing. and they might need extra dollars from like, I don't know, a county that might not have a state university college in there. So I was wondering how it's distributed, because we go and negotiate, in my opinion, we go and negotiate just so that we don't have, or with the state legislature, so we don't have to negotiate with the cities when we do need help with growth. I'm wondering how we could also secure those funds from other cities possibly if there's a distribution based off of population or what have you. Does that make any sense?
Yes, sir. You want to know how the money in the local option fuel tax trust fund is distributed
Throughout the
to
state.
the entities. My best understanding is that they're grants. They're distributed by grant, which indicates that it's not in, quote, equal or equitable distribution. I'll confirm that for you.
Yeah. So it's per project, per occurrence?
I don't know the basis of the grants. That part I'd have to check for you, and I'll get back with you today.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, you have a comment?
Yes.
Second issue
Second issue.
is university governance, and it's on page 5 in the legislative tab. And we think this will be a easy as they get issue. It's a follow-up to the governance bill from last session. And after the Board of Governors signed an agreement with the legislature and the governor that kind of clarified roles with respect to governance of the university system, House Bill 7237 was passed and signed by the governor. In our review of that bill this summer, we found that there are a few items related to development of regulations that need to be changed in statute. And it's simply, if you look at that list, a few things where we'd be asking the legislature to change the law so that the board's regulation process is recognized in lieu of the rule process that most state agencies currently use. And we don't think this will be controversial. We think we can do this as a glitch bill. We'll talk with legislative staff and members about that, but we expect that this won't be too controversial.
Okay, questions? Can I get a motion first in support of this glitch bill? Second? Second. All right, any questions? Discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Next.
Third and final issue has to do with undergraduate summer term enrollment for students who earn credits through accelerated mechanisms. The current law says that if a high school student earns 9 or more hours through an accelerated mechanism, which includes things like the International Baccalaureate program or advanced placement, that when they come into a university, the university cannot require that they attend a summer term. The university provosts have unanimously requested, and the presidents have approved a request to have that law, or ask that that law be repealed. What it would allow for but not require, universities would be able to, by institution, determine whether or not some or all of their students would attend summer term. The University of Florida would like to pilot this program, and Joe Glover, who's the provost at University of Florida, is prepared to address this issue. But we think it also would, by repealing this, would leave it up to the Board of Governors to determine if there were some parameters that needed to be in place to protect certain populations, or to make sure that it was implemented in an appropriate way. So,
Mr. Provost? Push the button.
I'm happy to talk about it in general, or I'm happy to answer questions, whichever.
Can you give us a brief overview of it, and then we'll see
Okay.
if there are any questions.
Let me give a little context and a little history. This statute actually came about probably 6 or 7 years ago when the state had an experiment involving the CLEP examination. There were 2 statutes that were passed simultaneously. One statute required each entering freshman into the state university system to come in with 9 accelerated credits. And if they did not have those accelerated credits, they were required to attempt to obtain them through the CLEP examination, which was funded by the state of Florida. Simultaneously, the state passed this accompanying statute, which we're talking about today, which exempted those students who achieved success on the CLEP examination from having to attend a summer term. it was clear after 1 year that was really a failed experiment and really a waste of taxpayer money. And the legislature repealed the statute requiring that students take CLEP examinations, but they left in place, and to my mind omitted, the fact that this other accompanying statute had been passed as part of that program. So the Board of Governors actually has a regulation currently on the books that requires FTICs who enter the state university system to attend one summer session. This statute specifically exempts students with 9 or more accelerated credits from that regulation. We, in particular, would like this regulation repealed for 2 reasons. One is we think it's good state policy to repeal it because we think it will encourage accelerated progress towards graduation, make greater use of our facilities, and a couple of other benefits. There is a second reason we would like to have this, and that is the University of Florida would like to experiment with a program of admitting students who would attend in the spring and summer terms and not in the fall terms. We're all tied into a traditional approach of fall and spring. The problem is that our fall term is at capacity on the University of Florida, but because of December graduation, the number of students on campus drops in the spring, and then it drops again in the summer. So we have capacity in the spring and summer, but we don't have capacity in the fall term. And we would like to offer a cohort of up to 1,000 students the opportunity to go in the spring and summer terms. So that's an additional reason that we would like this statute repealed. I think the provosts feel in general that the university boards of trustees acting with the Board of Governors should have the ability to decide appropriate policies by campus and to institute them.
Okay. Questions?
Your question about the financial impact on students.
I raised the question with Joe, and we had a conversation about the fact that there is a financial. I raised the question, Provost Glover, and we talked about it, that there is a question about there can be a financial impact on a certain group of students, and
yes, and
you had an answer to that, how you felt that we could assure the students that, that might be covered. Could you cover that?
With respect to the pilot program that I talked about, where we would like to have a cohort of up to 1,000 students who do spring and summer, those would be normal, full-time University of Florida students, and we would treat them through student financial aid so that if they had need-based aid, it would be addressed through the usual university mechanisms. In addition, as part of this cohort, if we just allowed these students to come in the fall and the spring, the legislature would automatically cover their Bright Futures Awards in addition. So it is our intent that as we begin this program, that we will come back to the legislature through you and ask that this cohort of students be allowed to use their Bright Futures Award in spring and summer instead of fall and spring.
Because they're not allowed to do that at this point. So you would ask a group of students to go to the summer, and they couldn't use Bright Futures. They can't work in the summertime when many students can have employment. So I could see the risk of our placing a certain group of students in a very precarious position. So I think that's something we'd have to address so that we don't leave another group behind.
And the students, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, the students that we're talking about are predominantly Bright Future students. That's one of the reasons they're an accelerated program. So it is very germane.
We'll have further discussion, but can I have a motion on this to approve this?
So moved.
We got a motion,
So moved.
second from Governor Beard. All right, any further discussion on this?
Does your motion tie in the fact that we would make this a package, that it would have to also include the change in Bright Futures? Because if we do one without the other, then what we've said to a whole group of students at whatever university does this, that we're going to compel you to take X number of hours, but you can't use your Bright Futures for it.
We will certainly come back next year and ask the Board of Governors to take to the legislature our request to allow this group of students to use Bright Futures in the summer. I mean, we will do that, and we believe that it's at no extra cost to the state. I don't know how you would like to structure that or incorporate that.
Is there any reason why it all can't be done at the same time?
I guess because we do not have a cohort in place who will begin in fall of 2011. We were advised by our legislative team that this was not the appropriate year in which to make that request, because we actually would not be requesting funding for the next year. It would be for the following year.
I guess, I'm sorry.
Councilman Duncan?
Yeah, I guess, the other side of this is, are you forcing people into this cohort, or is this a volunteer?
No.
Yeah, I mean.
No, we.
Huh?
No.
No, he's saying, yes, he says no.
Into this cohort of 1,000 students, we would offer admission into this special program, and they could accept it or not.
Yeah, they're not having to do that, so I guess that's where I was thinking that it does kind of make sense to stagger that. The making them go to 9 hours during their course of their time sometime is what most other kids do, and that's more of an efficiency utilization of the facilities. But I think, aren't they kind of two separate? I mean, they support each other, but it's not just this 1,000 students we'd be talking about, right?
Correct. But again, the Board of Governors already has that regulation
Right.
on the books for
Right.
students who don't have the accelerated credits.
So this suggestion is just being compliant with our current policy, really, I mean, our regulations.
From our point of view, yes.
And my question is, if we get rid of the statute, then they can do whatever they want to do, unless we're going to go back again, and then we've got to start regulations. I mean, if the statute is not there, then they don't have to ask anybody about that. They can do whatever they want to do. That's the reality of it, okay? Because we don't have anything that says opposite. I'm not opposed to it, and I told Joe, I think it's a great idea, and I'm glad for the entrepreneurial thinking they're doing. I'm just concerned, okay, that we go forward with this, but we haven't thought about a group of people, okay, who, number one, are not going to be able to get Bright Futures. It may not affect a lot of families in Florida, but it may affect a bunch of them. And I think it needs to be tied together.
And Dr.
I guess
Glover-
Madam Chair.
Charlie, you have your hand, you went out, Charlie.
Okay.
I think.
Norm, I'm not quite sure I'm following you.
All right, let me
The
explain
students
again.
do not
There's a
have to
statute
go
now-
into this
There's a
program.
statute now that says they can't require people to go to summer school. If the statute is repealed, then they can require people to go to summer school, is
It
my
doesn't say that, it
understanding.
says you're not allowed to go to summer school, I thought.
The Board of Governors policy,
And if they do require them to go to summer school, they can't collect Bright Futures. So that's one of the issues.
in reference,
Charlie wants to finish his
For
question.
that summer.
Governor Edwards, go ahead.
the Board of Governors policy is now and has been for, at least 30 years that I'm aware of, requires every student to attend at least 9 hours of summer school. And the reason for that was a utilization of space, facilities, and faculty. It was pure economics. And that, I've never heard students complain about that. What the University of Florida, if I understand it, is proposing is that if students want to, they can come in the winter and summer rather than the fall and spring. It's optional. They don't have to do that. Now, currently, if they do that, they would not qualify for Bright Futures. That's where they would hope in the future that statute could be amended so that they would. But that's optional. It's not forcing anybody to do anything.
I made my point. I
Okay.
mean, I'm not, because I like what they're trying to do. This is a very tough one for me. So
I understand.
I'm just trying to make sure that we don't speak for a group of people that find an economic impact.
I understand.
That's what I'm.
I appreciate your comments.
May I make a comment, Mr. Chairman?
Madam Chair?
I guess, based upon the conversations that we've had about this issue, is this something that only the University of Florida is going to, impose or attempt as this pilot, or is it something that the other 10 will also work with? I just want to have some idea of what we're doing. If I can hear from somebody else. Or, Joe, if you had the answer for everybody else, that's great.
Let me make a general comment. CAVP did discuss this particular statute and whether or not it should be repealed.
Right.
And I think that the provost agreed more or less unanimously that it should be repealed on the general grounds that that campuses should be allowed to set their own policy in terms of summer enrollment. Now, whether any other campus has contemplated the particular type of pilot I'm talking about with a cohort of students who attend only in the spring and summer, I don't know, and we would have to consult the other provosts individually.
So I guess that's my question. I mean, are you guys considering using the method as explained by the University of Florida's provost, or?
We were just going to watch them work the kinks out.
Dr. Glover, I have a question.
Dr. Beth?
I just had a question. What's the incentive for students to do this? Why would a student choose to come into January, begin in spring instead of fall? Is it because they can't get in the fall because you're at capacity and they're on the waiting list or something?
No, it's not that students simply begin in spring instead of fall. In principle, if they start as freshmen, for their 4 years, they would only allowed to be in residence in the spring and summer terms. They would never attend a fall term in principle. And the incentive for a student to do this is because we believe that there is a cohort of students who would be happy to attend the University of Florida in spring and summer to pursue their degree with us instead of going to a different institution on a more traditional schedule. I mean, we already have examples of literally thousands of students who are doing University of Florida degrees through distance education and who never come to the campus in principle. And so we think this is an additional model. I will say that in some sense this is one little step towards a grand experiment. Should universities, in the interest of efficiency and utilization of facilities, go to a year-round calendar where students are spread around the whole year? This would be a little experiment to find out if that's feasible.
Is that like the quarter system?
No, not exactly. That would be somewhat different.
The old trimester system has been kicking around for 40, 50 years, that desire to have a year-round use of our facilities.
If we do this, we still get to write a regulation, right? So we can then address the students' needs.
I think the legislature's going to write the regulation for us.
Yeah, I mean, so.
Governor Duncan.
I guess, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure what I was reading here, though, really isn't necessarily the approval of Florida's plan or any of the regulations we would need. It is really just saying, regardless of how many AP classes you come to school with, you're going to take 9 hours during the summer, period. So I guess I just want to make sure I've got that straight.
Yes, that is correct.
So I guess, from how the rest of the experiment works out or where it goes, philosophically, from an efficiency side of the equation, this seems like a no-brainer.
We shouldn't get bogged down on the experiment that University of Florida is going to do with this new regulation. President Hitt.
It removes an exemption that I think is ill-advised, and I think we ought to support it on that basis. I think a lot of us will be looking to see how well the Florida experiment works out if it's approved. I suspect that summer and what it means varies a lot across our system. We had I think about 35,000 students in the summer school session this year. I don't know that we want a whole lot more than that. If we were in Gainesville or in Tallahassee, we might well be wanting to add more, and it might make a lot of sense from the standpoint of good use of facilities for us to do that. I hope we'll approve this and we'll get to see whether an interesting experiment works.
Okay. Seeing no further hands, I'm going to bring the matter to head. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Against.
Against? Okay. I'm sure the motion passed. Okay. Mr. Maxey?
The last thing I just want to point to is on page 9 under that tab, and there's a list of 15 issues that we are monitoring, which means that we're not asking for the board to place them on the agenda, the substantive agenda, and we're not certain that bills will come up that address these, but they are issues that have come up in the past or are being discussed over the summer and fall. And we want to make sure that if they come up, we're prepared, one, and that we can respond as a system in an appropriate manner. And I'd be happy to talk about any of these that you have questions about.
Have you all had, the members of the committee had a chance to look at some of these? You need any input on them now?
I didn't understand all of them. Could he just tell us what the basic issue is on some of those?
Well, you tell me which ones you want, and we'll do the ones you want.
Physician assistants,
Physician's assistant.
residency for transfer students from private colleges. Those two, I think, I didn't understand quite what the issue might be.
Physician's assistants and residency.
All right, on the physician assistants, we're responding to two letters. One that went to Congresswoman Ileana Ross-Layton, and the letter complained that there were not enough programs in Florida for people who wanted to be physician assistants. Specifically, they were talking about foreign-trained doctors who were now in the States. They were citizens of the United States and the state of Florida, and they wanted to take this program in the state. They were complaining that they weren't there. The second has to do with the cost of these programs, because they have a component for practice with physicians, and physicians charge a fee for those opportunities. And the letter raised the question about whether or not this should be free, that basically internship should be free to students who come through this program. I've been speaking with Michelle Palacio, who is one of the governmental relations directors at Florida International University. This issue has come up before in the legislature, and it hasn't been addressed by the legislature. So we thought it important that, one, we become familiar with the background on the issue and be prepared to deal with it should it come up. Now, one matter that has been brought to our attention is that there may be a need for these kinds of programs. The question is whether or not the legislature should direct that this program be set up, more of these programs be set up. And that's something I think the governance agreement and House Bill 7237 say is a decision the board should make. It is a programmatic matter. But that's why it's here, because people have written letters to it and it's come up before.
And the residency?
The residency law currently says that if you're an out-of-state student, in order to be reclassified as a resident of Florida for tuition purposes, you have to be in the state and demonstrate that you're here for at least 12 months for a purpose other than attending school. Now, we find out that there are students from out of state who attend private universities or private colleges. They're here for a year, they may be working, and then they come to our system, and there's question about whether or not, because they were here for a year outside of our system, that they then qualify for in-state tuition when they come to us. So the idea would be, if we need to address this, then we would make it clear that they can't do that. The question then comes up, well, why don't you just go ahead and do it? This is a really complicated part of the statute, and our experience has been whenever it's opened up, sometimes we don't fare as well as we'd like. So the problem's not large enough that we think we should ask for something to be done, but that if it gets on the table, we want to be prepared to address it as a system.
All right.
Mr. Chair, last issue, and it's not here, so I'll do it really quickly. We are committed to also continue to work with the universities on an ongoing issue, and that is the number of duplicated reporting requirements, both state and even federal. I realize federal is not a part of our traditional legislative packet for Florida, but we want to look at the ongoing issue of reporting requirements to see if we can eradicate any unnecessary duplication of reporting requirements. In some cases, dovetail the dates of the reporting requirements from the legislature, always from the Board of Governors, but as well as the federal level, to see if in fact we can just make life a little bit easier for the universities as it relates to all of the volume of reporting requirements that people have.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Rick, is anything else?
No, sir.
I have some.
I'm going to be right to you. For our committee, I think the committee meetings begin in the legislature a couple weeks after the November elections. And I'm going to ask as many of our committee members as possible to try to attend a day or two of those meetings so we can get around and spend some time with our legislative leadership. And I think it's important also, I've mentioned to Rick, that we can probably do a better job of coordinating with the trustees of our state universities, many of whom have wonderful relationships with legislators, so we get on the same page and seek their assistance and help with our issues, which are really their issues. So we're going to try to do that. But in November, I'm going to ask all of you all to try to spend a day in Tallahassee so we can spend some time with our legislative leadership. Madam Chair.
There is one other item that is not on the list, and we discussed it during Tim's presentation, that I would ask your committee to spend some more time thinking about, and that's this whole Cortellis matching grant issue. I know we've talked about it several times. My concern is that we talk about it at a Board of Governors meeting and we don't kind of follow up with some type of strategy or plan. And given the fact that everyone is so concerned about efficiency and everybody's concerned about the budget, I can't think of a better use of our dollars when we just have so much money sitting there and just waiting to be matched. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask you and your committee if you can have Rick work with his cohorts to come up with some type of strategy to put this issue in the forefront. If it means we need to involve our grantors in the process, something that we can do to get the attention of our legislature, the fact that we have a good place for you to get 50 cents on your dollar, and that this is just a great way for us to really incorporate some of the folks who are willing to make big contributions to our university system and to moving the state forward. So if you would add that to your agenda, I really would appreciate it.
I'll do it. Any other comments for the good of the order? Oh, Madam Chair has another comment.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. This is on a different note. I just want to, again, commend the Legislative Affairs Committee. You started your work during session. We have had committees before that dealt specifically with the legislature, but this is certainly the most active one we've had to date, and I just want to thank you for that. Again, I want to, to thank, the Speaker and the President last year and the Governor's Office for working so closely with us. It is because of our good relationship that we developed with settling the lawsuit and coming together with the Governor's Compact, and the fact that we now have the Higher Education Coordinating Council in place, that I think that we're going to be able to move the system forward. And I just want to commend this committee. This is really, I know you met during session, but this is the first time we've actually had a committee meeting during a full Board of Governors meeting. And I hope that our legislative folks see this as a step forward and trying to work with them and really move the system forward and be as efficient as possible and come up with things that we can work together on and make a difference. So thank you very much.
All right. Nothing else for the good of the order. The meeting is adjourned.